Welcome ye companions, traversing history's obscured pathways. Before we venture into the shattered cloisters of medieval religious houses, I am curious to discover your current location on the globe. Whether you are settling into slumber in Manchester, commencing your evening relaxation in Melbourne, or discovering a tranquil interval somewhere in between, I am profoundly appreciative of your presence. If these explorations into history's more unsettling verities strike a chord within you, kindly subscribe to ensure our continued descent into history's most somber recesses is never missed. Now, recline comfortably and permit your consciousness to journey alongside me to an epoch where conviction and trepidation walked intertwined, where the pledge of deliverance arrived accompanied by the specter of eternal punishment. Visualize, if possible, the undulating landscapes of medieval Europe, sprinkled with imposing stone monasteries whose carillons summoned the devout to observance. These consecrated locales, with their ascending arches and radiant manuscripts, symbolized the zenith of pious dedication. Yet, behind their revered ramparts, within the stillness between devotions, sinister events unfolded. We are familiar with the idealized accounts depicting medieval abbeys as strongholds of erudition and benevolence, where devout brothers transcribed ancient parchments and attended to the infirm. Popular culture has portrayed these sacred communities as havens of serenity, inhabited by benevolent friars and sagacious abbots personifying Christian rectitude. However, tonight, we shall strip away that surface of holiness to reveal the authentic nature of existence within these consecrated collectives and the reasons why obscurities they projected were frequently more extensive and profound than the radiance they professed to disseminate. We shall encounter abbots governing as despots, monks discarding any semblance of compassion, and entire orders transforming into instruments of subjugation rather than redemption. Yet initially, we must grasp the milieu that birthed these perverted sanctuaries. Medieval Europe was a territory where mortality frequented every threshold, where scarcity and pestilence could annihilate entire hamlets within a season, and where the prospect of paradise presented the sole refuge from an existence often brutally brief and saturated with anguish. Into this desolate sphere advanced the Church, offering not merely spiritual solace, but tangible command over the forces that horrified the common populace. The religious fraternities materialized from this crucible of dread and conviction. Some, such as the Ben, traced their lineage to the dawn of Christianity, when anchorites retreated to the wilderness to evade worldly decay. Others, like the Franciscans and Dominicans, surfaced amidst the societal upheavals of the high medieval period, pledging amendment and rejuvenation. However, as these orders expanded in affluence and sway, many drifted from their foundational tenets, evolving instead into mechanisms of dominance and misuse. Consider this as they established themselves in isolated wilderness territories, clearing woodlands and draining marshes through grueling exertion. Yet within generations, these identical abbeys had metamorphosed into vast agrarian enterprises operated by legions of lay brethren subsisting in circumstances scarcely distinguishable from bondage. The white-robed brothers who had once embraced destitution feasted on delicacies while their laborers survived on coarse fare. The degradation extended to the nucleus of monastic spirituality. The intricate rites and observances characterizing pious existence became hollow performances detached from authentic spiritual significance. Brothers recited prayers mechanically while their intellects dwelt on worldly concerns. The sacred scriptures they transcribed were often modified to serve political objectives, with inconvenient passages omitted or rewritten to bolster the Church's program. Ever thought about the Knights Templar? These warrior monks took vows of poverty, purity, and obedience. But guess what? They also built massive fortunes through finance and trade. Pretty wild, right? These holy warriors, claiming to fight for Christ's glory in the Holy Land, grew so rich and powerful that they actually started to threaten kings and popes. Their eventual downfall would reveal a tangled web of secret rituals, shady money dealings, and political games that really dug deep into the heart of medieval life. Cloistered life, meant to be all about spiritual reflection and serving the divine, often turned into a stage for some pretty dark human impulses. Young nobles, pushed into religious roles they didn't choose, losing their birthrights to relatives just looking to grab more power and wealth. It's like a real-life Game of Thrones. Instead of finding peace, these unwilling brothers and sisters brought their grudges and ambitions into the monastery, transforming what should have been a haven of tranquility into a hotbed of conspiracy and tension. It's wild how a place meant for calm can become a breeding ground for drama, right? Inside those abbey walls, a strict hierarchy really took hold, and honestly, it could be even harsher than what folks faced outside. Newcomers, they went through some seriously intense initiation rites. They called it spiritual training, but let's be real, it felt more like a test of how much you could endure without breaking. If you had the guts to question authority, you could find yourself facing some pretty brutal consequences, like being publicly shamed or tossed into dark, damp cells. It's kind of wild when you think about it. What was meant to be a journey toward enlightenment ended up feeling like a prison. Promises of freeing the spirit from worldly worries turned into chains, trapping people in a system that just drained their energy and passion. It's a real eye-opener. What was supposed to lift you up ended up holding you down. Within the abbey confines, an inflexible hierarchy materialized, mirroring and frequently surpassing the harshness of secular culture. Initiates endured savage initiation rites disguised as spiritual training. Those challenging authority encountered penalties, ranging from public mortification to solitary incarceration in subterranean cells. The very pledges intended to emancipate the spirit from earthly anxieties became manacles binding individuals to systems, exploiting their toil and crushing their essence. Even the good deeds that monasteries were known for often seemed more about boosting their own image than genuinely helping those in need. Picture this. Sick people heading to monastic were met with outdated medical practices that relied more on superstition than actual science. And when the poor came looking for food, they were given just enough to keep them coming back, all while being lectured about their moral failings. It's pretty disheartening, right? Foundlings placed in the care of these monasteries often ended up trapped in a cycle of unpaid labor, working hard while the very institutions that claimed to protect them profited off their efforts. It's a stark reminder of how sometimes even the best intentions can lead to exploitation. What do you think about this? Isn't it wild how things weren't always what they seemed? The degradation extended to the nucleus of monastic spirituality. The intricate rites and observances characterizing pious existence became hollow performances detached from authentic spiritual significance. Brothers recited prayers mechanically while their intellects dwelt on worldly concerns. The sacred scriptures they transcribed were often modified to serve political objectives, with inconvenient passages omitted or rewritten to bolster the church's program. It is pretty unsettling when you think about how some religious groups twisted the whole idea of divine justice. Right. They claimed to be speaking for God while using their so-called spiritual authority to justify some truly horrific acts. I mean, can you believe they would burn heretics alive, insisting it was out of love for their souls? The Inquisition, mostly run by the Dominicans, was notorious for torturing people into confessing, all while claiming they were saving them from eternal damnation. It's like a bizarre, dark twist on the idea of compassion, don't you think? The wealth amassed by monasteries was quite the scandal, even back in the medieval days. Picture this. While abbots preached about the virtues of living simply and embracing poverty, they were living it up in luxury that could rival kings. Their monastic treasuries were bursting with gold and precious gems, gifts from devoted followers. Meanwhile, the folks in the surrounding countryside were often struggling to make ends meet, living in poverty and neglect. This glaring gap between what the church preached and how it actually operated was so obvious that it sparked waves of reform. It played a huge role in kicking off the Protestant Reformation, which changed everything. Can you imagine the frustration of the common people seeing such hypocrisy? It was a real wake-up call. Diving into these hidden stories is like peeling back layers of an onion, revealing all sorts of surprising truths about medieval religious life. We'll meet brave souls who stood up against the decay around them, often paying a heavy price for their courage. Think about those who risked everything to protect their beliefs, like the monks who defied corrupt authorities, or the everyday folks who spoke out despite the danger. We'll also explore how good people sometimes got tangled up in dark systems, maybe just trying to survive or fit in. It's wild to see how the quest for power twisted even the purest hearts. Remember those who started with good intentions but ended up lost in the chaos. It's a reminder that the line between right and wrong can get pretty blurry, So, get ready to uncover these fascinating tales that challenge everything we thought we knew. The religious fraternities of medieval Europe were way more than just groups of devoted folks trying to serve the divine. They were complex organizations shaped by the same human feelings that drive us today, like greed, ambition, fear, and that deep desire for control. To really get what they were about, you've got to peel back that holy layer and dive into the messy human reality underneath. Take the Knights Templar, for instance. They weren't just about faith. They were also savvy bankers, amassing wealth and power. Or think about the many abbeys and monasteries that became centers of political influence, where the line between spirituality and worldly ambition often blurred. It's fascinating, right? These groups were as much about human nature as they were about divine devotion. Tonight's expedition will guide us through abbey portals opening not onto paradise, but onto a realm where spiritual authority masked worldly tyranny, where the pledge of salvation arrived at the expense of human dignity, and where the very establishments intended to embody divine affection evolved into engines of persecution and misuse. The obscurity we shall investigate is not merely historical intrigue, but a reminder of how readily noble ideals can be perverted when dominion remains unchecked and authority claims divine sanction. As we step into this intriguing and shadowy realm, let us take a moment to remember that the folks we're about to meet were shaped by their time, influenced by beliefs and circumstances that seem almost unimaginable today. But here's the thing, these stories are still super relevant. They reveal truths about human nature that go way beyond any specific time period. Seriously, Every era has its share of incredible goodness and some pretty dark stuff too. Just look at the religious groups of medieval Europe. They show us how thin the line can be between virtue and vice. So, let us dive into these fascinating places where the sacred and the profane mixed in ways that would probably make the faithful gasp. It is wild to think about how trust in religious authorities sometimes led to both uplifting and shocking moments. Get ready for a journey that's going to challenge what you thought you knew.